They say the forest is alive, not just with wind or wildlife, but with eyes, ancient eyes, watching from the shadows. What if those whispers in the woods aren't just your imagination, but something that's been guarding the forest long before we ever walked it? The story begins in the summer of 2007, when environmental researcher Dr. Elias Warren and his small team from the University of Bucharest entered the Blackwood Forest, an untouched stretch of land near the Carpathian Mountains. The goal was simple: document the biodiversity of the ancient woodland before government logging permits opened the area for deforestation. Locals had warned them not to enter. "The woods don't like strangers," said an old man at the last village before the tree line. He spoke in broken English, but his tone was clear, fearful, pleading. At night, the forest breathes. Don't stay when it starts. Of course, Elias laughed. He'd been in jungles and mountains across the world. He'd heard every myth and legend locals had to offer. But as he and his team, Laura, Ben, and Katerina, set up camp, something about the silence felt off. There were no birds, no insects, not even the rustling of leaves, unless the wind forced it. The forest was beautiful, but unnervingly still, like it was holding its breath. That night, as they sat by the fire, they noticed it, faint creaking, deep within the trees, almost rhythmic. Laura said it sounded like something walking. Ben joked it was probably deer, but Elias noticed something strange. The sound came closer, then stopped, right at the edge of their firelight. When they shone their torches, there was nothing. The forest swallowed the light. The next morning, Elias began exploring. The deeper he went, the more he realized how old the forest really was. Trees as thick as towers, roots like walls, the air damp and heavy. But it wasn't until he found the stones that he began to believe the legends. Hidden among the roots were tall, weathered stones covered in carvings, eyes, hands, and human-like figures bowing beneath tree branches. He documented everything, sending photos to the university. But when he showed them to a local historian in town, the man grew pale. "These are Zarnavi stones," he said, "from before Christianity reached these lands. They mark sacred ground, a pact between man and the forest." According to ancient folklore, early tribes believed the woods had guardians, entities neither gods nor demons, tasked with protecting the balance of nature. They were said to be old as the soil itself. People called them the Hollow Ones, because when they took human form, they appeared tall and thin, with faces like carved bark and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. In the 1400s, villagers would leave offerings, milk, salt, or the blood of small animals, to keep the Hollow Ones calm. But if someone entered the forest without permission, it was said the guardians would mark them. The marked would never leave the forest whole again. Elias dismissed it as myth until the second night. It started with whispers, not human, not animal, just faint, unintelligible murmurs circling the camp. The team thought it was wind tunneling through the trees, but the words formed patterns, syllables, almost like language. Laura recorded the sound on her phone. When she played it back later, the audio revealed something none of them had heard clearly before: a deep, guttural voice repeating the same phrase in an old dialect. Katerina, who studied folklore, translated it after hours of research. It said, "Leave what you took, leave or be taken. That is when they realized Ben had pocketed one of the carved stones from the roots earlier that day. Elias forced him to return it, half as a joke, half out of superstition. But when Ben went back alone, he didn't return. They found him at dawn, standing in the middle of a clearing, barefoot, eyes wide open, mumbling the same phrase, leave or be taken. He was alive, but unresponsive, as if his mind had been emptied. His palms were raw, covered in splinters, as though he had been clawing at the trees all night. The forest around him looked changed. Trees had shifted slightly, bending inward like ribs forming a cage. That was the night Elias stopped laughing at the stories. The team tried to leave, but every path out led them back to the same clearing. Their compass spun wildly, their GPS malfunctioned, and the signal was gone. It was as if the forest itself had rearranged. Lara began to panic, swearing she saw movement between the trees, tall, shadowy figures watching from afar. She said they weren't walking, just standing, perfectly still. When Elias checked, there was nothing. That night, it rained. The fire sputtered out, and the forest came alive with sound, cracking branches, heavy footsteps, and that same whispering chorus rising from all directions. Elias turned on his flashlight and caught a glimpse of something that still haunts him to this day. A face pressed against the bark of a tree, human in shape, but made of wood, its eyes hollow, but glowing faintly from within. When he blinked, it was gone. By morning, Lara was missing. In her tent, they found claw marks, deep, uneven, as though someone or something had dragged her out. There was no blood, no struggle, just her necklace tangled around a root outside. Elias and Katerina were the only ones left. They followed what they thought was the path back to the road, but the forest seemed endless. The air grew heavier, harder to breathe. Then they saw the carvings again, but this time the stones had changed. New symbols had been added overnight. 2 more human figures etched beneath the trees. Their figures. Only one of them ever made it out. 3 weeks later, a local search party found Dr. Elias Warren wandering near the edge of the forest, barefoot, clothes torn, dehydrated but alive. When they asked what happened, he refused to speak. His medical report noted extreme psychological trauma and signs of exposure, but no memory of how he survived. He never returned to academia. In his final interview years later, Elias said only one thing worth remembering. The forest remembers everything you take, and it always takes something back. When journalists revisited the Blackwood site, they found no trace of the camp, only the old stones, half buried under moss. But one stood taller than the rest, freshly carved, depicting a human figure with hollow eyes standing between 2 trees. Maybe these stories weren't just myths. Maybe they were warnings. For centuries, humans believed the forest had guardians, not kind spirits, but ancient watchers ensuring balance. And maybe, after all this time, they're still there, waiting for us to forget the old rules.